I'm Micah Smith from Denver 7, and welcome to Denver Decides. This community partnership is dedicated to accessible and transparent elections. This partnership includes the League of Women Voters of Denver, the Inter-Neighborhood Cooperation, and is presented by Denver 8 TV. Our mission today is to present a candidate forum in anticipation of the general election coming up on Tuesday, November 3rd. Among other offices, this election includes the candidates vying to represent constituents in Colorado State Senate District 31. District 31 is located in central, east, and southeast Denver. Our format is a pretty standard one. We will begin with opening statements that will be followed by rounds of questions that have been submitted by the organizers of this forum. Since we do have a time limit, we may not be able to get to all of the submitted questions. All of the candidates will answer all questions and their responses will be timed. So let's begin by meeting the candidates vying to represent Colorado State Senate District 31 as your next state senator. The candidates are standing left to right facing the audience in the order that their names will appear on the November ballot. So beginning at my right, Chris Hansen, and on my left, Doug Townsend. Welcome both of you to this forum. And one more note to the candidates on behalf of our viewers, we sincerely urge you to be honest, direct, and forthright to help the voters distinguish one candidate from another. We will begin with 1-minute opening statements from each candidate. We will proceed in ballot order with these statements. So once again, starting at my right, Chris Hansen will begin with your opening statement.
All right. Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be with you this evening. Very pleased to be able to address the voters of Denver about this very important state Senate race. My name is Chris Hansen. I represent you in the state Senate right now, and I'm running for re-election to continue the work that I've been heavily involved with the last 4 years in the General Assembly. Most notably, I've made big progress on climate change, reducing emissions in the state of Colorado. We know we're up against a climate crisis, and we need to take dramatic action to address the environmental problems that we face. And I've been a part of that solution. I've been a part of the team at the Capitol that's made major progress on that very important issue. I've also been heavily involved in the budget work at the state Capitol, having served on the Joint Budget Committee as well as Senate and House appropriations. We have significant budget challenges that we face as a state of Colorado, and I've worked in a bipartisan way across the aisle year after year to meet those challenges head on, and I'm asking for your support tonight to continue to serve you at the state Capitol. Thank you.
And now an opening statement from Doug Townsend.
Thank you very much. My name is Doug Townsend. I entered this race because I believe everyone has a right to make the important decisions that impact their lives. Where their kids go to school, how much of their hard-earned money they have to hand over to the state, how they choose to protect themselves and their loved ones, who they choose to worship. I believe our current elected officials are socializing our state by taking over ever larger segments of our lives and our economy with little regard for your rights and liberties as a citizen. I'm a CPA, a chief financial officer, and a former school board president. I understand how increasing taxes and excessive regulation hurt our citizens and our business community. I understand that parents are the most important educator a child will ever have. I want to fight for limited government, fiscal responsibility, and equal application of the law for all, so that our state government will once again allow you to pursue your personal American dream, whatever that is. Thank you very much.
Thank you both for your opening statements. And now our first question for our candidates. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer. We will start in reverse order from the opening statements, so we will begin with Doug Townsend. Why are you a member of your political party, and was there one compelling reason why you joined?
I certainly don't believe there's one compelling reason. When I look at my overall philosophy on how this country was founded, it's founded on the rights and freedoms and individual liberties of our citizens. We've been that way for 240 years. When I look at the positions of the respective parties, I simply believe that the Republican Party is the party that sits there and espouses those beliefs. They believe in the limited government so that individuals are not being told what to do or what not to do, how to live their lives. They believe in limited government that keeps the regulations out of the business community so that our business owners are free to pursue their vision of what their business should be, however that may be. They are allowed to make their own decisions. So when it comes down to it, it's really just the fundamental philosophies of the Republican Party and how those match up against my personal philosophies. That's what this country really should be about.
Let's turn to Chris Hansen for his answer to that question.
Thank you. And I've been a lifelong Democrat. In fact, when I was 18, went door to door for Bill Clinton in 1992 in my hometown. And I've been a Democrat ever since. And it's for several really clear reasons and a strong contrast to what the other party is offering. First of all, Democrats are about equal opportunity. They're about economic justice. They're about racial equality. And they're about environmental protection. We've seen the Republican Party in the state of Colorado and nationwide erode environmental protections, erode racial justice, attack economic opportunity. We simply cannot continue to go down this road. I've been a Democrat my whole life because I believe in these principles, and I will continue to fight every day for you at the Capitol to make sure that we're protecting our environment and protecting the people of this state and making sure that we have equal opportunity across the spectrum.
And now our next question for the candidates, and we'll begin with Chris. Who are the major contributors to your election campaign?
So I've raised money from over 1,000 individual donors over the course of my campaigns. My campaigns are built on the grassroots effort and going door to door in the district, talking to people firsthand in the district. And that's what I've built my campaign on. I also have worked very hard to help raise money for the Democrats across the caucus, so meaning making sure that we've got the resources we need to win the election and have a majority at the state capitol. Those are the things I've concentrated on and will continue to run my campaigns in that way.
Doug, your opportunity to answer that question.
Well, my donations have come from the hardworking Coloradans who believe we need a change in the government. I don't have money coming in from PACs. I don't have money coming in from lobbyists. I don't have money coming in from companies. And if you want to go to Tracer and compare the contributions to my opponent and myself, I think you will see that there is a difference in where we're getting our money from.
Okay. And Doug, you will be the first to answer this question. The Denver Planning Board is in favor of the Group Living Amendment, one of the most significant and sweeping zoning changes proposed in recent history. If this passes Denver City Council, it would increase the number of allowable unrelated adults in one dwelling unit from 2 to as many as 40 plus their families. Is this the right or wrong thing for your constituents, and why?
I've talked to hundreds of constituents as I've walked and knocked on doors, as I've gone to neighborhood meetings. This is one of the most significant issues that they are faced with right now. I have not talked to a single person who is in favor of these proposals and these changes. So based upon the feedback that I have received from the constituents of Senate District 31, I would absolutely oppose this. I think it's the wrong solution. Folks are open to alternatives. They recognize that there are some challenges that we have to face, and we have to sit there and address those challenges. But the proposals that are out there right now, those are not the right solutions in the eyes of our citizens. And it's their property that's being impacted by this, their neighborhood that's going to be impacted by this. I think they deserve to have the right to have the input that they don't believe they've had so far. And we fundamentally just need to redo this process and find out what the objective is, talk to the citizens, and figure out what the right plan of attack is.
Now, Chris, your answer to that question.
Yeah, well, I think you've correctly identified this as fundamentally a city issue. And I've had a chance to talk to the city councilors who represent the citizens in Senate District 31. I think there's a tremendous amount of additional process that is still to come as they fine-tune what was the opening draft. As I've definitely learned in my 4 years in the legislature, the initial proposal is often drastically adjusted after you hear feedback from citizens. And that's exactly what I see happening at the city council right now with the process on this particular proposal. But again, fundamentally, this is a city issue and one that the city councilors and the mayor are going to ultimately decide. I think the initial proposal is not well balanced. My own personal feelings on it, and I've communicated that to the city councilors who represent citizens in Senate District 31. One quick item to add on the campaign contribution side, I do want to note that my opponent has basically self-funded his campaign. And so it's nice to say that he doesn't take contributions from different categories, but essentially it's been self-funded up to this point.
Now let's continue with our questions for the candidates vying for the state Senate seat from District 31. Chris, you will answer first. What can the state working with municipalities do to address climate change, especially with respect to forest fires?
All right. Well, I appreciate the question. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, climate change is my top priority at the General Assembly, making sure that we are reducing emissions as fast as we can, as cost effectively as we can in the state of Colorado. There's no doubt that forest fires, pine beetle kill, reduced snowpack in the mountains, hotter summers, increased air conditioning bills, all of this can be directly linked to what's happening with our climate crisis. And so rapidly decarbonizing the electricity sector is something I set in motion with the bill that I passed, Senate Bill 236, which is basically ending the use of coal-fired generation in the state and rapidly increasing the use of wind and solar. And that's exactly the path that we need to go down and electrify, but do so in a way that does not increase emissions. And that's what we're doing in the state of Colorado, in large part to the legislation that I helped pass in 2019. I'm also working hard to bring in more electric vehicles to rapidly decarbonize our transportation system. And finally, I've got legislation that I'm going to introduce next year to help decarbonize our building sector.
Now, Doug, your answer to that question.
Thank you. I have 9 grandkids, and I hope that they can grow up in a clean and healthy world. I'm a scuba instructor. I've seen directly firsthand the impacts of global warming and the CO2 emissions on our oceans from the Arctic Ocean to the South Pacific. This is certainly an issue that we absolutely must address. It is a critical issue. But I think we have to work together to do this in a fair and balanced way. And I'm not sure that the approach that my opponent takes necessarily meets that balance. The U.S. is the world's leader in CO2 emission reduction. When you look at China, India, that's where the increase in the CO2 output comes from. We can reduce all the CO2 emissions in Colorado we want. We're never going to offset China and India. So I think we need to take another look at this. There's a different approach. There's a little bit of this not in my backyard in Colorado, that the oil and gas regulations that the voters turned down, that then the General Assembly came in and said, no, we're going to pass those by fiat. Anyway, they come in and try to sit there and implement those. Thank you.
Next question for you, Doug. And this is another one from our sponsoring partners. We will begin with you. On what topics or positions do you most and least agree with Governor Polis?
That's a really good question. I think that early on in the COVID crisis, when Governor Polis was taking some executive actions to provide relief to our citizens, to our business community, whether it be delaying tax payments, electronic notaries, those types of things, the day-to-day type of thing that people have to do to live their life. I was very pleased to see him take a number of those actions to relieve some of the burden that our citizens were going through as we were all battling COVID and stay-at-home orders and things of that nature. The things I disagree with him are the fact that we're 6 months into this COVID situation. He still treats it as a crisis. It is a significant issue we have to address. But the fact is, in the last 6 months, we've seen increases in suicides. We have increases in alcoholism and other substance abuse. We have increase in domestic abuse. We now have another crisis that's facing our state that we're completely ignoring. We have to address those as well, too. We have to have a balanced approach to this. So I think that's what I would most disagree with him on.
Chris Hansen, your answer to that question.
Yeah, thank you. So when I served on the Joint Budget Committee and then later on House Finance and Senate Finance and Appropriations, had a chance to work closely with the governor's office on a number of really important reforms in the state. And one that I agree with the governor on and voted for on a couple of different occasions, which we finally got passed in 2019, is the expansion of full-day kindergarten in the state. We need to make significant additional investments in K-12 education. We are more than $1 billion behind from where our funding levels were in 2007, and we now have about half the school districts in the state that are on 4-day school weeks. And so in making that investment in full-day K, I really agreed with the governor on. We were able to figure that out in the budget and make a lot of progress on that front. I think the part where there's been a lot of active negotiation with the governor in recent years, particularly last session, was how we move forward on looking and scrutinizing tax expenditures in the state. We've got a number of corporate tax loopholes that are still in place that I think we need to address next session.
Now the next question for our candidates, and Chris, we will start with you. During your tenure in the Senate, what bill have you introduced or co-authored that you're most proud of and why?
Yeah, thank you. I would definitely point to Senate Bill 236. I mentioned it in my earlier remarks. This is the bill that basically is ending coal-fired power in the state and rapidly changing us over to wind and solar. It's creating thousands of new jobs in the state of Colorado, and it's putting ourselves in a good position to be successful in this 21st century. We need to rapidly clean up our power sector to be successful as a state, and Senate Bill 236 set us on that path. There's several parts of that bill that are going to be able to accomplish those goals and do it in a way that's very low cost, in some cases saving the ratepayers a tremendous amount of money. One example is how we're going to close down the coal plants, but still make sure that we're helping the communities and the towns, the workers that are affected by those closures. So we've put in place things around the idea of just transition to make sure we're not leaving anybody behind as we move from highly emitting sources of energy to clean tech like wind and solar. And that's a really important piece of the policy here in Colorado, and I think we've been a national leader on that front.
Doug, what are your thoughts on that bill?
I have to admit that I don't know all the details of the bill, so it's difficult for me to address it specifically. But as I mentioned earlier, the singular focus on the reduction of CO2 emissions is too narrow of a focus. It's a broader issue. Solar and wind, my opponent has mentioned a couple of times now. The fact of the matter is that's going to create all types of issues for us when we have to start recycling the blades, the turbines, the solar panels. Solar panels have a life of about 25 years. The windmills have a life of about 20 years. When you look back that we started doing a lot of this early 2000s, we're coming up on that time period where we're going to have to start cutting up the blades that we see out on the plains and figuring out what to do with those. Those are not easily recyclable. We have a number of other issues, environmental issues, that come about that. Solar, wind, it's not completely clean power. It's also not 100% reliable. So you still have to have the backup to it. If we count on the wind every day to keep our lights on, we're going to be lights out just like California.
Thank you, Doug and Chris. Our next round will be what we call the lightning round. Our candidates will be asked to answer questions I read with a simple yes, no, or pass. It goes quickly, so listen closely. And remember, your answer can only be yes, no, or pass. We will go in left to right order as the candidates face the camera. Chris, then Doug. Chris. Should groups or individuals not holding the permit for a permitted event be held responsible if they cause property damage or injuries?
Not holding the permit for the event?
That's correct.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
House members are paid a salary of just over $40,000 per year. Was the salary and benefits what attracted you to office?
No.
No.
Do you believe that undocumented workers contribute positively to Colorado's economy?
Yes.
Yes.
In the last 30 days, have you used mass transit, a bike, or walked for business purposes or to get to work?
Yes.
No.
Should Mile High Stadium be moved or rebuilt elsewhere to make way for more housing development?
No.
No.
Are you concerned that factors related to the COVID-19 pandemic will suppress voters' involvement in the November election?
Yes.
No.
Do you support the national popular vote?
Yes.
No.
Do you support a new dam on the western slope for Front Range municipalities?
No.
No.
If you live in a freestanding home, do you shovel the snow off your front sidewalk after a storm?
I do.
Yes.
And this is our last question for the lightning round. Have you ever attended the National Western Stock Show, and do you enjoy it?
Yes and yes.
Yes. And yes.
Good job, candidates, and thank you for your quick answers. For the next few rounds of questioning, it's going to be the candidates' turns to ask the questions of one another. Each of you will ask your opponent a question, and hopefully they will have an answer for you. We will reverse the ballot order and begin with Doug Townsend. Doug, you will ask Chris a question, and Chris, you will have 1 minute to answer. Doug.
Thank you. Chris, the League of Women Voters Election Guide survey asked how you would address the economic crisis resulting from the COVID pandemic. Your response stated you felt it was important to increase unemployment insurance benefits. Why do you believe increasing a government payment to individuals, which will stop at some point in time, is more important than reopening businesses so Coloradans can return to their jobs and earn their paycheck?
Yeah, Doug, I think the premise of your question is flawed. This is not government money. This is premiums that have been paid into the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. So this is not something where it's a government direct payment. My answer to the League of Women Voters was about stabilizing and making sure that we have a functional unemployment insurance trust fund in the state of Colorado. Because of the global pandemic, because of COVID, we've drawn down the funds that are available in that trust fund. We've had to now borrow from the federal government. That will have to be paid back by the employers and the employees of the state of Colorado. So it's not some government check. It's something that we have paid for collectively as a state. And I think having unemployment insurance is a really important part of the social safety net, and that is not any more clear than it could be right now in the middle of this pandemic. It is helping people pay the rent, put food on their tables, make sure their kids are safe and warm. Unemployment insurance is a very important part of our state, and I was working hard last session to make sure that that system is maintained and is stable.
Now, Chris, it's your turn to ask a question of Doug.
Thank you. Doug, I'd like to know about your position on whether or not Donald Trump should be reelected. I think given your previous statement about caring about climate change, it seems in a hard contrast to the policies pursued by Donald Trump. Do you think he deserves reelection?
Chris, we're running for the Colorado State Senate. We're not running for national office. We're not running for president. My focus is exclusively on what I can do to sit there and make life better for Coloradans. Whether I support Donald Trump or don't support Donald Trump, or for whatever reason I do or don't, has no bearing on my desire to work hard for Coloradans and make their lives better. I would almost turn that around, that when I look at your Facebook posts, when I look at your Twitter posts, that the vast majority of those focus on national issues. Are you really interested in running for the state Colorado Senate, or are you more interested in running for federal office?
Now, Doug, another question from you for Chris.
Chris, you are a prime sponsor of the Tax Fairness Act this session, which reversed a number of the provisions of the bipartisan Federal CARES Act as they impacted the calculation of Colorado business taxes. As a result of this bill, our small businesses have less cash, which means fewer employees are rehired, fewer vendors are paid, and more businesses simply cease to exist. All of these result in consequences of lower tax revenue, both in the short and the long term. Why don't you support Colorado small business?
Again, Doug, I think you've got the wrong premise for the question. The House Bill 1420, which you're referring to, was really about how do we create the right level of congruency between state and federal tax treatment. So in Colorado, we have what's called automatic parity with any changes that happen to the federal government. We then have to make a decision if we want to continue to have that parity. And what we were looking at is how do we help low-income families in the state survive in this moment of crisis. And House Bill 1420 pulled Colorado out of automatic congruency or automatic acceptance of the changes made in the Trump Tax Act. And instead, we just made our own decision in the state of Colorado of which corporate tax loopholes should be available for businesses across the board. We cut back some of those so that we could pay for earned income tax credits for the families that are struggling in the middle of this pandemic. That seems like a very logical choice given the challenges that we're facing as a state. Get rid of corporate tax loopholes and help the families that need it the most.
Chris, your turn to ask Doug another question, and Doug, you will have 1 minute to answer.
Thank you. Doug, I wanted to ask you about your support for Tabor and the fiscal constraints that it places on our state government. You've said that we've got plenty of resources at the state to pay for transportation, education, even though we've faced major billion-dollar shortfalls in both of those areas. So my question is, if you support Tabor, what cuts to the budget would you like to see to be able to fund transportation and education?
In any budget of the magnitude of $30 billion, there are several billions of dollars that can be reduced from that. I've spent 40 years in financial management, in public accounting, and CFO and CEO roles of companies managing multi-billion-dollar budgets. The money is there. The fact is we ended up in this budget crisis this year because in the last 3 or 4 years, our General Assembly has been acting like it's Christmas every year. We were at the end of the longest expansion in the history of this country. We all know that that's going to end at some point in time. So instead of adding new programs, whether it's the full-day kindergarten, a reinsurance program, or any of the many other programs that the legislature has added the last few years, a lot of that increase in the growth of our general fund should have been allocated to projects, transportation, paying down para, things that could really be one-time type of projects. So when revenues did turn, when the economy did turn, we didn't have to make the types of cuts that you're asking about right now.
Thank you, Doug and Chris, for your answers to those questions. And that brings us to the end of our Q&A segment, and we now move to closing statements. Each candidate will have a minute for a closing statement, and we will reverse the order of the opening statements, which means we will begin with Chris Hansen. Mr. Hansen, you have 1 minute for your closing statement.
Thanks very much. Again, a pleasure to be with you this evening. I'm so glad to be able to share some time with the voters of East Denver. And I appreciate the League of Women Voters and the entire partnership that has brought this event together. I am running for re-election to the state Senate, and I'm asking for your vote tonight because I want to continue to work hard on your behalf at the state capitol. We've made significant progress on environmental protection. We've made significant progress on providing better quality services to the people of the state of Colorado. I want to continue that work. I also know that we have significant budget challenges ahead. And I think my experience on the Joint Budget Committee, on Senate Appropriations Committee, is going to be invaluable as we try to put together a very difficult puzzle in the couple of years that are in front of us. We have a significant downturn in the economy, and we need to continue to support businesses, support families as they recover from this difficult moment. And it's so important to have experience and know-how at the state capitol. And so I'm asking for your support to continue this important work on behalf of the people of East Denver. Thank you.
And now a closing statement from Doug Townsend.
Thank you. Well, Chris, thank you for coming out and providing an opportunity for us to share our views with the voters. I think it's important for them to hear where both of us stand on these issues as they make their decision. When our Attorney General nominated my opponent to this seat, the Senate seat, he told the Vacancy Committee that we need a team player and someone who is committed to the number one issue of our time, addressing climate change. Upon accepting the appointment, my opponent said he was running on his record. Climate change is certainly a significant issue we must address. But I believe opening our businesses so Coloradans can get back to work, managing our budget so you can keep your money to spend the way you want to, empowering parents as the most important educators for their children, actually lowering the cost of health care, and protecting the lives and properties of all Coloradans are equally important issues. You heard my opponent's record. He's not passionate about those issues. He's not on your team. I am. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug and Chris, for participating in this forum. And thank you to our Denver Decides partners, which include Interneighborhood Cooperation and the League of Women Voters of Denver. Denver Decides is presented by Denver 8 TV. Remember, Election Day is Tuesday, November 3rd. Make sure your voice is heard, be sure you are registered, and be sure to vote. For complete election information online, go to denverdecides.org. I'm Micah Smith from Denver 7 News. Thanks for joining us.